Hey, I'm Kyle Buchanan. I'm the author of Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, the wild and true story of Mad Max Fury Road. Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV.
Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner, and today I'm proud to welcome Kyle Buchanan, aka the Projectionist from the New York Times. How are you, mate?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've been a fan of your work for a long time because you've been on the New York Times for a couple of years. But prior to that, you used to work for Vulture, and if you check out Kyle, anybody checking out Kyle right now can check out a litany of his excellent film reportage and pop culture journalism online. But today you're joining me to talk about something very special, which is Blood, Sweat, and Chrome, the wild and true story of Mad Max Fury Road, which has just been published by HarperCollins and is available from the links attached to our conversation. Kyle, how did that project come to be for you?
I kind of backed my way into it. It's not as though I didn't know there was a story there. I think, I love the movie. I've been obsessed with it since it came out. And I had heard over the years all sorts of, interesting rumors or juicy stories about the unconventional way that they made it. And it just so happened that as we were approaching the fifth anniversary of the movie, in May 2020, we went through a worldwide pandemic, and that was during the lockdown portion where I, sort of had to scramble and decide, well, what am I going to cover since there aren't new movies coming out to cover? It's my day job is writing that sort of thing for the Times. And I remembered it was about to be the anniversary, and I sort of had a hunch that everybody else would be at home, all these actors, George Miller, people whose years are usually very scheduled out, and they would just be at home. And their publicists would not be earning their keep. So I thought maybe I could pull together a very, small compared to the book, but large compared to the amount of time that I pulled it together in, an oral history for the Times. And I did in May 2020 put out kind of the junior version of this, which was an oral history with about, I think, 23 participants, most of the actors and George and some other key crew members. And it ran in the Times, and it was about 4,500 words. And it was, a big hit, and praise was very juicy, but I knew that there was so much more to it, just even in the interviews that I'd done for that. As large a piece of real estate as 4,500 words is in the New York Times, there's so much more to the story. And truly something that I learned as I started writing the book version that I had a hunch about is that every single person who worked on this movie has a great story about it, not just because they're incredibly creative, interesting people, but because there just has never been another shoot like this. And I think a lot of people were very excited to share their memories of it because, it's probably the movie that they've talked about the most with their friends working on. Like, oh man, wait till you hear the stories about Fury Road.
I mean, it's such an interesting piece of work. And before we talk about your work interviewing everybody involved with the movie, what's your personal take on Mad Max Fury Road? What is it that you love about it?
I think it's incredible. I love a good action movie or a good superhero movie. And when I saw Fury Road, I realized that I had been setting my bar too low. That, I mean, there's plenty of decent, well, I might be overstating things. There's some decent ones, some decent action movies out there, but they just don't have the vision that Fury Road does because they're all executive driven. Everybody's chasing, the Marvel franchise model
Yeah.
and trying to have these shared universes, and shared universes are not typically, overseen by a directorial mastermind. It's an executive. Fury Road comes from George Miller's head with a lot of key collaborators, but he is the auteur who is pushing for that movie to be unique and have a drive and a verve and a method that is super unusual. I don't know. I thought it was so obviously so incredibly visceral. Every single punch, fall, crash felt uh more than real. And again, made me realize that I had just gotten really used to weightless CGI.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, even if it were just a paper thin action movie with those incredible stunts and visuals, I think I would still be super into it. But there is so much lurking beneath that surface, both on screen and off. I mean, there was a lot of thought that went into all those themes and those characters, but then there was also a lot that went into coming up with those things and inhabiting those things in real life. So for me as an author, it was a gift because the story and the ideas of that movie absolutely bled into the artist's real life when they were making it.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point because it's such an amazingly kinetic piece of work, and the film is in constant motion, of course, when you watch it, which is a very unusual experience to grab hold of as a viewer. But I think equally unusually, the fact that that in itself came out of some sort of chaos is really quite amazing, because I can't remember a film of that nature where seemingly so few of the people involved with it, and they actually saw the final article, were so surprised by what they saw. That they couldn't connect the chaotic experience with that incredible piece of indelible art.
I mean, key collaborators, Tom Hardy apologized to George Miller at the Cannes Film Festival because he really did not get it until then. Charlize got it along the way, mostly when she started seeing early cuts. It's a tricky thing, this was a movie that was written in thousands of storyboards. Some people could go to George's office in Sydney and, read it from left to right, all these storyboards, and get a sense of what it was. But a lot of other people thought, okay, I don't know if I'm seeing it, but I trust you. And sometimes that trust wavered because George is a very professorial personality. You'll talk to him and he can talk to you so genially about history and ideas and themes. But when it comes down to the specific nitty gritty that especially actors need to hear, maybe that's not his best oratory skill. If you want to know the movie that George Miller is making, you won't necessarily know it until he shows you the final version. And so that can send actors, executives, and other people for a loop. But if you have your faith in him, just like in the movie, they've got to have their faith in where they're going, otherwise they'll go crazy. Then it can be rewarded.
That is really so interesting, and such a well-made point. Having spent this time with with George and with the other contributors to the movie, what are the stories that really leapt out at you that you didn't expect? What surprised you? What did you find out that surprised you along the way?
I mean, I know that everybody will be interested in the Tom and Charlize of it all, and
Of
certainly there's
course.
been surplus of headlines on it. And I give Charlize and Tom a lot of credit for even talking about it, knowing that it would set off another round of headlines. But honestly, my favorite stories were just getting the stories of crew members. Part of the reason that this is an oral history is because I think it really gives you a greater sense of what it's like to be on a film set. I think if you were reading a written through book about this, inevitably the quotes would come from, the famous people, and everything else would be sort of paraphrased in background. And I really like that you can skip from a quote from Charlize or George to a visual effects data wrangler who got into this business because he's obsessed with Mad Max, and then to a costume designer, and then to a stunt man. And I think that gives you, that gives the lay person a better sense of just how many people work on a movie, and how, yes, there are people who are top of the call sheet, but if you walk on the set of a movie, you're just surrounded by all these crew members who have their own ideas, their own takes, their own lives, their own goals, and their own frustrations. And I am happy that as near as I could get it, I feel like it reflects that vibe.
Something I should mention for anybody watching this, which is that there's a wonderful list that's curated by Esquire, the 125 greatest books about cinema, and Blood, Sweat and Chrome is right there on the list, which must have been tremendously satisfying for you, mate.
It is. Listen, I know that this book will be bought by the Mad Max faithful, and certainly it is my gift to them. But I also think if you're at all interested in how hard is it to make a movie, there are not a lot of stories about that are better than the Fury Road story. So I think, it's been exciting for me to hear back from people who maybe were sort of casual fans, or, in some cases hadn't ever seen the movie, but were intrigued by what they were reading about the book and got really swept up in it. And also, it's very exciting for me when people read the book and tell me that there's a tension throughout where they're wondering, God, are they going to be able to make this movie? Even though you know that they did make the movie, and that's the reason why you're holding that book. But you do get swept up in it. It's a great story, and I felt very fortunate that everybody gave me the access and the time to tell it, because I'm happy that's out there in the world and that I got to be the conduit for it.
Yeah, it is a great story, but I think you've done it wild and tremendous justice. And thanks so much for joining me, Kyle. Everybody watching this, Kyle we've got a beautiful signed edition available from forbiddenplanet.com that you can buy from the links attached to this conversation. And please check out Kyle's wonderful movie journalism at The Projectionist at New York Times. And thanks so much for joining me, mate. It's a wonderful book. I really loved it.
Thank you, Andrew.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.